What's going on, it's Darryl Syms, and today I'm going to be showing you how John Mayer solos over a blues progression. So recently I've done kind of a little mini series, if you like. I've talked about how to play blues rhythm effectively, how to solo over that progression. Now I'm going to be talking about how the pros do it, particularly John Mayer, because I love John Mayer. Who doesn't? So the song that you had at the beginning is called Every Day I Have the Blues. So we're going to be analyzing that specific solo and sort of breaking it down to see how John uses particular intervals over a blues progression. And also, I got tabs exclusively for my Patreon supporters. They're handwritten and annotated with all the different intervals and things that I'm going to be talking about in today's lesson. So if you're interested in becoming part of the Patreon team, then make sure you check out the link in the description below. Now, just before we crack on, I want to emphasize the importance that you understand interval awareness, because I'm going to be talking about that a lot throughout this lesson and how John targets specific intervals over the chords. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then maybe you want to check out my previous blues lessons. Check them out. For those who do know what I'm talking about, let's make a start. So this song is written in a typical 1-4-5-12 bar blues progression. Those chords more specifically are C9, that's your 1 chord. And then we've got F7, that's your 4, and then G7, your 5. Now the solo is introduced with this phrase. So we're highlighting that root note there on the B string of the 1 chord. And then we've got... Now this is particularly interesting because he bends into the minor third and then lifts it up to the major third. Very briefly, before the next phrase, which sounds similar to the start. And then now this is also noteworthy because towards the end there, with all those hammer-ons, he'll change to that minor third, which leads you into that 4 chord, because the 4 chord has that minor third of the 1 chord. On that 4 chord we have just a very cool phrase there. And then the second bar of the 4 chord sounds like this. So as we finish that phrase, it changes back to the 1 chord, which makes this 13 a particularly nice note to fall on, because that's the root note of the 1 chord. Moving on from there, we've got a kind of typical minor pentatonic shape with a little bit of an interesting twist on it. Sounds like this. So it starts off quite typical, but then bends that minor third into the major third of that 1 chord, and then finishes. Before moving on to the next 2 bars, which highlight your 5 and your 4 chord. They're very similar phrases actually. Let me play them slowly for you. And then that leads you on to the 1 chord again. So we've got this kind of descending pattern, which is kind of built from a 9 chord. So if we take the 5, which is G, and we change it to a 9 shape, we're kind of playing with the bottom section there. And then essentially doing the same thing with the bottom part of the F9. And then as we progress onto the 1 chord again, John just hangs out on this hammer-on pull-off. At the end there, he slides into the 12th fret of the D string, and then we go to the 1 chord again, and we have a series of phrases which are very similar to each other. So check this out. So at the beginning of each phrase, John's giving some heavy vibrato on the 8th fret of the G here, which kind of implies a minor to major feel, because we're bending from that minor third to the major third over that 1 chord. At the end, you'll find John does this a lot with this song. He'll slide into particular notes on particular strings. In this case, we've got 7, 10, and 12 on the G. Before the next phrase, which leads into our 4 chord, it sounds like this. So you can see it's just a bunch of very similar phrases there based on the minor pentatonic pattern of C. And then the only one that I really want to make noteworthy is the last phrase because it's got an awesome technique. Check it out. So it's cool how he bends up on the B string and then bends down on the B string before the 1 chord occurs, where he hits that 8 and gives it some heavy vibrato again. And then he'll do the same thing one more time with the 2 slides on the end. And then we approach the 5 and the 4 chord, where he plays phrases that sound like this. That last bend there falls on the 4 chord, and we're going to repeat that a few more bars before the progression starts again. So we've got from that first bend on the 4 chord, and that leads us into our 1 chord. Let me play the following series of phrases slowly and then I'll explain them. So I think this one's particularly noteworthy because of the use of minor thirds and major thirds in the same bar. Particularly at the end there, he'll sort of play that minor third and then slowly bend it up to the major third of that 1 chord. For the next phrase, we've got so that huge bend there on the 4 chord adds so much attitude. Moving on to the next bar, still on our 4 chord, we have now we approach the last 5 and 4 chords, and we're going to do something that we did similar in the first 12 bar, and that's follow those chords. So check this out, we have this melody. There's that real quick phrase at the end there, before hitting the root of that 1 chord. And that just about concludes the solo. So I'm going to play the whole thing at a slow speed for you to try and follow along too. But the main thing that I want you to take away from this is understand how John uses dissonance in his lead playing over a blues chord progression. So here we go from the start. There we go. With the exception of a couple notes, it actually seems harder to play it slow than it is fast, but hopefully you could follow along with that. Best of luck learning this, and like I said, the main thing is this is not a tutorial for the solo. This is more of a breakdown and analyzing the concepts and theory behind it, particularly with the interval usage over a blues progression. I do strongly advise that you get a hold of the tab and really sit down and study all the annotations that I've written on there so that you get a greater understanding of how John creates dissonance over a blues progression. There we go, that's the end of the lesson. I hope I gave you a good insight on how John Mayer solos over a blues progression. I suggest that you try your best to incorporate these ideas into your own playing. As I said at the beginning of the video, if you want to download the tab for this piece, then check out my Patreon, which is linked in the description below. Or maybe you want to gain a greater understanding of intervals and other theory ideas, in which case I recommend you check out my practical guitar theory course, which is also linked in the description below. Until next time, I'll see you in the next video.